right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Galbert Family Miami Beach JCC on the Simpkins Family Campus. I am so glad to have a full room today with all of you here tonight for our very special program, Attend the College of Your Dreams. We are thrilled to welcome two incredible professionals from Command Education, a premier college admissions consultancy that's been recognized nationally for helping students succeed in their educational journeys. Joining us this evening is Christopher Rim, founder and CEO of Command Education. Christopher is a Yale graduate, an emotional intelligence expert, and an innovator in the field of college admissions. He's worked with Meta and the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, collaborated with the Born This Way Foundation, and was honored by both Forbes 30 Under 30 and President Obama with the Lifetime Achievement Award. We also welcome Gabe Cramer, Managing Director at Command Education. A Stanford grad and professional athlete, Gabe brings a unique perspective on balancing academics, athletics, and leadership. He's played for the Kansas City Royals organization and represented Team Israel in international baseball competitions. We are incredibly lucky to have their expertise and insight tonight. We also want to thank our amazing event chairs, Ellie Stokes and Zach Geronimus. And thank you also to our dedicated teen host committee, Alexa Baru, Abby Hoffman, and Matthew Mulrad. And also thank you to BBYO for partnering with us to make this event possible. It is not written here in my script, but I also wanted to give a shout out and thank you to our Miami Beach JCC staff, who are always so helpful in putting on these events seamlessly for us and our community. So thank you for all of your work. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Christopher and Gabe. And with that, I will turn it over to our panel to get started.
Welcome, everyone. We're excited to have you here for this special panel on college admissions. My name's Ellie, and I'm a junior at Ransom Everglades.
My name is Zachary, and I'm a sophomore at Ransom Everglades. Today, we're joined by Christopher Rim, the founder and CEO of Command Education, a premier college consulting firm that has helped students gain admissions to top universities like Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. Chris is an expert in the field and is frequently quoted in major publications like CNN, Wall Street Journal, and Forbes.
We're also joined by Gabe Cramer, the managing director of Command Education. Gabe attended Stanford, where he played on the baseball team, and he also played in the Kansas City Royals organization, as well as for the Israeli national team in the World Baseball Classic and Olympic qualifying events for any fans out there. His unique blend of academic, athletic, and professional experience positions him as a dynamic and insightful leader in the education sector. And we'll start with some questions for Chris and Gabe about college admissions, and then we'll open it up for questions at the end. Our first question is, can you give us a brief overview on what students need to know about applying to college, when you do it, what you have to do to send your application, and when you hear back?
Sure, I think I can answer this. A lot of times students think it's about, grades and test scores, and that's what you need in order to get into a top college. And that's why every year you hear of stories where, the valedictorian of a school, applied to all these great Ivies or top schools and pretty much rejected by all of them. I think actually there was a viral piece on Twitter or X a few weeks ago, how this student had pretty incredible stats, great GPA, 1550 SAT, but was not admitted to any of his top choices, or even like second tier or third tier colleges. And he also posted, this student, on Twitter, his entire personal statement, some of his extracurriculars, but it really wasn't what colleges are what they were looking for. And I think what we try to do is help students understand how to stand out, and that can mean anything. You don't have to join the debate team because that's what you think college admissions officers want to see. I have an example that I love sharing. We had a student who created a YouTube channel, and she created a YouTube channel to review makeup products. And this student went to Horace Mann in New York City, like very competitive private school. And this student got into Columbia, got into 2 other Ivies. I think she graduated from Columbia now. But, that's what allowed her to stand out, creating a makeup review channel. No other college consultant or school would probably, kind of push her into that direction. But that was something unique, something different, and something she was genuinely passionate about. So what I would say is, the best piece of advice is to do what you're interested in, do what you're potentially passionate about, see if you like it, and just continue, because then you're going to work harder, you're going to be more invested, and that's how you authentically stand out through the process.
Yeah, and if I can just add the boring part, the logistics of that question, the part about when that process really happens and how it manifests on an application. And Chris is absolutely right that the best way to stand out is not to copy the person that you saw the year prior. It really truly is to explore your own interests and passions in a way that allows you to showcase what it is you bring to the table as a person, as an academic, as a community member, as a friend, as a roommate, as a student. All of those things are what we're trying to pull out of students. But towards the end of junior year, you really are thinking about your college list and what realistically the options are going to look like for you based on your GPA, based on your test scores, based on your leadership kind of resume. And at that point, we're really helping students kind of start in earnest their college application process, which is college list building, application writing, and for you, Ellie, that's going to be going through this pretty soon. It sounds like in about 6 months. You're going to be submitting your early applications November 1 of your senior year. So the fall of your senior year, hearing back just before Christmas break, December 15th, and then your regular decisions will go in on January 1st. So it's a lot of work that leads up to a very compressed timeline, and that's why it's important to start early so that you're not scrambling with your hair on fire at the end of the process.
And always apply early decision or early action, but early decision is better.
Okay, so it sounds like a lot of moving parts. What's the most important thing that students should keep in mind when applying to colleges?
Yeah, I think for me it's two things. One is that don't fall in love with a single institution. It is a myth that every student can only succeed at one school and that there's only one place for you. I think that's the narrative that everybody likes to see, and that's the one when I went to Stanford, it was very easy to say that was the perfect place for me, and everything worked out and I had green lights all along the way. But I like to think that I would have been very successful at Berkeley, at UCLA, at Vanderbilt, at Duke. And I think we're looking for students to truly look for that match and to find that type of school and to find that experience and that environment that's going to allow you to thrive, and that's going to be more than one university. And so I think a big piece of advice I would give is don't fall in love with just one place. The odds are it's really hard to get into that one place, and so we want to make sure that you're thinking about the other schools on your list as well. So that's one piece of it, and the other piece would be that it does take a village to go through this process. And I think the more that you can lean in and engage with your community, the better off you're going to be. So that means, interact with your family and have these types of discussions. Talk to your school teachers about this process, the ones that you trust most. Talk to your guidance counselor, even if they haven't scheduled a meeting for you. Try to understand as a sophomore who your recommenders are going to be by building relationships with your teachers, with your coaches, with your trusted mentors and advisors in your extracurricular activities. Those are truly the things that are going to help you stand out, because those relationships you have can't be replicated by anybody else. And if the people that are supporting you and helping you through this process are saying unbelievable things about you, sounds a lot better than when you say them about yourself. So understand that the people around you have a lot to offer in this process.
And a lot of times students kind of undervalue or think that the letter of recommendations from teachers or your dean or your college counselor at school, it's really not that important. It's actually incredibly important. I think I was having a conversation with somebody right before this about like how you can check your files at a university if you were admitted, and they write comments on why they think or why they want to accept you and what they think you'll achieve on campus and whatnot. And I read one of the letters, and I'm pretty sure it's because of that letter that I was admitted to Yale and other colleges. And it was like 3 pages single-spaced, that one of my teachers wrote. And, that just shows start developing authentic relationships, like after school, like, in school clubs, extra help, tutorials, with teachers, club advisors, because that can go a really, really long way and have a huge impact. So keep that in mind, because it's not just the grades, it's who you are that they are actually looking for. And that's what sets U.S. college admissions apart from pretty much the application process for colleges everywhere else in the world. In the UK, it's about grades, test scores, that's it. It's pretty much the same thing for Canada, for the rest of Europe, in Asia. Do you have the numbers, yes or no? And that's how they'll decide whether or not you're admitted. But it's very different in the US.
Thank you. So how important are standardized tests now that some schools are test optional and test blind?
I would say they're incredibly important, but it really depends on what high school you attend. If you, I can just ask, how many of you attend like Ransom, Pinecrest, Country Day? One, okay. Where do you guys go to school? Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody else goes, okay. So I would say, if you attend private school, you should most definitely take the SAT or ACT, but then only decide to submit it if your score is good enough. If you attend public school, and if it happens to be a competitive school or happens to be in a region where there are a lot of competitive applicants, you still want to take them, simply because you are compared against your classmates, your peers, people you might not even know within your community or within that region. So for example, Harvard would set up different regions in different states or cluster of states, and they'll say, you know what, we want to accept 5 students from Florida. And it's not just Miami, it's all of Florida. And that's what they're going to pick, because they want geographical diversity as well. And of course, this changes year after year. They might say one year we want 30 students from Florida. The next year might be 0. That's happened in the past. So because you are compared to other students, you want to stand out. And you can do that with the grades. Let's say your GPA, your extracurriculars, your letters of recommendation, they're all pretty much at the same level. But one student submits scores, and maybe it's a 1550 or 1600 perfect score because they're applying for competitive colleges, versus another student who doesn't submit a score. It's less riskier for the institution to accept the student with a higher SAT score, right? Because they know that the student's going to be able to handle the work, not drop out, or not get kicked out of the university. So always try to take the test and see how you perform. Now, if you can't get higher than like 1100, 1200, and you're trying to get into a top tier college, then skip it. I mean, then it's not worth it, and don't waste your time, because these tests are very coachable, but it's also exhausting and not a great measure of how smart you are. There's no more subject tests now, but I was very good at 1 hour subject tests because they were 1 hour and I can't sit still. But for the SAT, I did terribly. But for the subject test, I took 3 of them and got perfect in all 3. So, I was able to kind of balance it out in that way. But right now, subject tests are gone. It's just the SAT or ACT. So my recommendation for most students, take the exam.
And if I can just add to that, you can go Google the common data set online and take a look for almost all schools in the United States will participate in this, and you can see what the median 50th percentile is, and you can also see what percentage of students they're admitting with test scores versus without. And you see at the top schools, the vast majority of students admitted to Ivies and Ivy Plus schools are still submitting test scores, and those that aren't, we can kind of glean that they're most likely coming from backgrounds that won't allow them to take those tests, or they're doing something far and above beyond the test to showcase their intellectual ability in a different way. So it's not a monolithic decision where you're going to say every kid needs to do this. It's certainly the easiest way to showcase your just raw intelligence. But if it's not a fit for you, you might just need to take another AP class. You might need to take summer school. You might need to engage in research. You might need to get a certificate for a Google AI program online during your spring break. There are other things that you can do to offset, but the easiest way to make your life, as streamlined as possible is to sit for this test. schools, and I was just talking about this beforehand, are kind of making a turn back towards valuing these tests a lot again. The kind of test optional experiment over the COVID and post-COVID years didn't go the way they anticipated, and a lot of students showed up on campus unprepared and not really at the academic level they needed to be to succeed. So they're kind of flushing these test optional policies away over time. Sometimes they've committed through 2026. Sometimes they've stopped them, wholeheartedly, for even this cycle. But the reality is your life is going to be easier if you can submit scores. So certainly worth kicking the tires on it as a sophomore in high school, at least taking a diagnostic, at least seeing how your PSAT 10 goes, and saying, is this going to be a reasonable amount of time that I can commit to this to get myself a qualifying score?
Going back on what you said about standing out, in your opinion, what extracurricular activities will help students stand out?
It can really be anything. We actually, I gave that example of that student who created a YouTube channel. I have another student who resold sneakers, would wait outside of Kith for like 4 or 5 hours in the city, buy some limited edition sneakers for like $1,000 and then resell it for $12,000, and was able to create a business out of it. I mean, I think he did like $500,000 in sales in 1 year, and he wrote about this. I mean, that was his genuine passion. And I remember his mom, this was like right before COVID, his mom came into our office crying, saying, why is he buying these sneakers to resell? I will make sure he's okay. He does not need the money. He needs to focus in school. He's getting like B minuses across the board. He's not going to get into any of his top colleges. We've paid private school tuition since kindergarten. What is he doing? Help me. And I said, actually, continue this, because I can guarantee you nobody else, this is like 5-6 years ago, nobody else from his high school is going to be writing an essay about how he waited outside of all these stores, bought sneakers, resold it, and then decided to hire people to wait in lines for him at other stores across the country to buy additional pairs. And that was his entire college essay. And that really stands out to me, because no school really tells students to work on this. And by the time that you meet your college advisor from your school, it's already halfway through junior year for the most part. And it's too late to start something or really be inspired to do something in the next 6 months. Because you have to think about college tours. You have to think about the SAT if you haven't finished it. There are other things you have to prioritize. So this is something you should be starting in 7th, 8th, 9th grade, or at least thinking about it, so that you're able to actually execute on it, or at least try. But there's so many examples out there. It can really be anything. It doesn't have to be just a list of clubs that your school gives you and you just pick one or two. It's not how this works anymore.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of tiers to the extracurricular game, which are the school offered opportunities and clubs. If you're interested in economics and business, if you're interested in marine biology, and there is an opportunity at your high school to engage in that field, you better do it, because it looks a little bit strange to say, I really want to study biology, marine biology, maybe one day even go pre-med, but I didn't join any of the clubs at my school, or there's a pre-med track even within my high school that allows me to take AP Bio and AP Chem joint at the same time, but I didn't take that. It's a little bit fishy to try and tell that story, that this is your true passion, if you weren't taking advantage of the opportunity right under your nose. But it can't stop there. Then you have to go out one kind of circle wider and say, well, what's going on in my community? If I am that marine biology or that potential pre-med kid, is there a physical therapy clinic that I can shadow in? Is there an opportunity to go into a surgery center and observe a surgery? Is there an opportunity to go to a really meaningful summer program at Johns Hopkins or at Columbia or at NYU and get involved in some kind of pre-med curriculum? Then beyond that, we really encourage our students to do exactly what Chris said, which is take that passion that you have and do something meaningful, something innovative, something exciting, something fun for yourself. Oftentimes we like students to kind of tie it back into a community need. And Chris has other, the other sneaker example you have of your student who ended up donating sneakers and connected with Nike and New Balance and all these major vendors to, provide shoes for students who didn't have access, track athletes who didn't have access to proper footwear. So there's a lot of ways that you can do this, but you kind of need to go one tier at a time. Take advantage of your school, take advantage of your community, then think, if I've covered those, is there something I can do beyond that to really show what I do in a meaningful and unique way? And we call that a passion project, but there are any number of names for it where you're doing a meaningful community project that's unique to just you.
And they also want, it doesn't have to be, being innovative is great, but it really also doesn't have to be. It can be something super simple. And, they also want to see how you problem solve. This is a great way to also showcase this talent. So right at the beginning of COVID, we had a student who volunteered at an animal shelter, loves animals. This is like 5 years ago now at this point. Because there were no more volunteers, basically every animal was adopted. He had no needed volunteering hours to graduate school, had no project. He was going to tie it in. What this student did, I think, was it was so simple, but it was genius. He lived in New York City. He pretty much went to all of his building and nearby buildings, went door to door to every single doorman, morning shift, evening shift, and gave them flyers and said, if there are any senior citizens or anyone who cannot leave their apartment to walk their pets, my group of friends, we will do that and come back. And this is like very beginning of COVID when no one left their apartments or houses. And that's what the student did. And it was so simple. There was really not that much technology involved except for a Google form. Was able to build this entire thing out and was able to pivot. And the entire college essay for the student was that moment of pivoting. And that's what allowed the student to get into his top college choice. And it wasn't unique. It was literally just walking like dogs in this building for 20 minutes outside. But he lost his volunteering opportunity, pivoted to that, and we thought that was a great story. And that's what they're ultimately looking for. They don't want to see you having an impact, in a different country or, a different state. They want to see how you've had an impact in your community right here at home. And that's what they're interested in.
What do you think one of the biggest mistakes students make in their essay and in their application as a whole?
Yeah, I can take that one. I think one of the biggest things students do is that works against them is that they speak far too much about other people in their essays. I think it's a really common mistake. You'll probably read about, top 10 tips not to do in your personal statement. And I think it's a really easy trap to fall into where you're writing about the impact somebody else has had on your life and you're forgetting to really tell that story from your own perspective and offer up what you saw and what you added to this relationship or this experience that you had. And it's really easy to fall into that trap. I think when I speak to students and I say, let's brainstorm some essay ideas, most of the time the first thing that comes up is something about a role model or a grandparent or a parent or a coach or some friend who's just amazing. And that's what they have an easy time talking about. It is not the most comfortable thing, but the personal statement is really an opportunity to dig deep and to share, unfortunately only in 650 words, some of the greatest things about yourself and the way that you see the world. And I think for young people, they haven't been asked to do that so many times in their life. And so it is a unique moment and a unique opportunity. So it should be a little uncomfortable. And I think most students shy away from that. They're like, I just don't like writing about myself, or this doesn't, it feels a little arrogant or just not me. That is how it should feel. That means you're on the right track. You should be pouring out the things that you have to offer to the world and the way that you see the world as much as possible in this essay. And another thing that I really see students do is that they don't utilize all aspects of the application. There is rules to the Common App. You can only apply to 20 schools. You have 650 words. You have 10 activities. You can bend any one of these rules when appropriate. You shouldn't be bending these rules when it's inappropriate, but there is an additional information section that allows you to add more information about yourself. If you have something meaningful to say and you have more than 10 activities that are impressive, you better use that space to do so. If you do have an additional recommender, even though most schools are only asking for 2, there's an opportunity to submit 3 at most places. You should use that opportunity. If you have a counselor who's willing to write a letter on your behalf when you're on a wait list, the rules don't say that you should do that, but you really should be looking at every opportunity to advocate for yourself in this process. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, and that is very true in this process. People will tell you, just follow the rules, be quiet, do exactly what it says, and I will tell you, you only get one shot at this. You can transfer if you're not happy with your results, but you usually only get one shot at this. Don't allow yourself to fall into the trap of, I better just, do the bare minimum and follow exactly the tight box that they're asking to put me in. We talk to admissions officers from time to time, and they are all saying, if it's there, we'll read it. If it's there, we'll look at it. The more information we have about a student, the better. The more information we have, the more biased we are to positively like them as well. We can tell their story better, and that makes us more comfortable admitting them. So more is better. Share as much as you possibly can.
And also have your school counselor call to advocate on your behalf. Every school counselor can do it. Unfortunately, a lot of them don't want to because it takes a lot of time. But even if you're waitlisted anywhere, your counselor can call and say, this is a student you do not want to miss out on. We've seen it work so many times. You send a letter of continued interest, then you have your counselor at school call until somebody answers. It should be the regional admissions officer, and your counselor at school should know who they are. But after you send your letter, have the counselor call the school, the admissions office, and advocate and say, this is the student you want to take. You waitlisted him, which means, the grades, the stats are already there. If somebody does not select you on May 1st or even before, you want to accept the student. Actually, today we had a student get into Chicago off the wait list, and it's been like a week and a half.
2 days. They sent a letter 2 days ago, a letter of continued interest. Their counselor followed up and called. A day later, they got an email from the regional admissions officer saying, we'd love to set up a phone call with you to talk a bit more about your candidacy. Today, they were let in off the wait list. Chicago might not even be looking at their wait list technically at this point. They're not even dipping into it yet. But again, the rules are the general rules, but there are exceptions to all of these, and we just encourage people to not allow themselves to go down without a fight. There's a lot that you can do in this process.
How early should students start preparing for college admissions?
I would say everything starting 9th grade counts. Most of our students start with us right before 9th grade. It is crazy, but we have students who call us when they're in like 3rd grade, 4th grade, asking to work with us. There's really nothing to do. There's nothing you should be doing, really. I would say the most popular time is really 8th, 9th grade to start with a counselor, just even start thinking about this process because it is so competitive. But grades do matter starting 9th grade. So but this is also could potentially not backfire, but like let's say you get straight A's 9th grade, you have to keep that up because your grades also can't go down. They have to be on an upward trend. So if you think you're going to get B's, get them in 9th grade and then just show an improvement. Because you definitely, so that's important. Everything starting 9th grade counts. 8th grade, it does not matter whatsoever.
And if you kind of look at some of the policies of universities, you'll see that you might get a hint. The UC system, for example, doesn't count 9th grade. Explicitly does not count 9th grade as part of their evaluation. That gives you a hint that even at other great universities, it's not explicitly not counted, but it certainly doesn't weigh as much as 10th and 11th and then your first half of 12th grade. So you can kind of understand that certainly 9th grade is a place to start, and it's a great time to start because, like Chris said, things do count. They go on your record, and really the way the college process works, the second that you graduate from 8th grade, you're technically a 9th grader. That summer before 9th grade is your 9th grade summer. But, you can't win the game as a 9th grader, but you can kind of run yourself out of the race, right? If you do struggle, if you take time to adjust, if you're is this still okay? Yeah, if you're taking time to adjust, and if you're not engaging in the right clubs and the right extracurricular opportunities. Probably me covering the laser. Yeah, if you're not doing that, you can't say I've been in this extracurricular for 4 years because you started as a sophomore. So there is some things that you don't want to forget to do as a ninth grader, but it is quite simple. The focus should be, there's no standardized tests at that point. You can't get yourself into the world-class merit-based summer programs, but you can learn how to take advantage of the curriculum at your school, how to get yourself on the right path to get to the highest level of, math, science, English, humanities, whatever it is that you want to do within your school. You can join the right clubs. You can, learn the study habits to be able to be successful, to take 5 APs when you're a junior. So there's a lot of executive function learning that happens at that age, and it really does set you up to build a foundation so that you can take on more as you go throughout high school and be successful when the classes get harder, when the extracurriculars get more time consuming, when you have to take an SAT.
There's a lot of pressure on students now to define their narrative early. So what advice do you have for students who are still finding their passion but feel pressure to define that narrative early?
That's my favorite question so far. That's a great question. I think there's so much pressure on young people. I mean, Chris and I went through this process not so long ago ourselves, but even so much has changed since then. And I view it as it's unfortunate at the level at which students are forced to think about the college process from, ninth grade. There are students we work with that are, consumed by this, and it is something that they just cannot stop thinking about everywhere they turn, from their families to their friends to their older siblings to their teachers. It's all that they think about. And I really do think there's a way to go about this process without sacrificing your well-being and your mental health and your childhood. And I do encourage students at a young age to explore many interests. And as a freshman, you should be hopefully thinking to yourself, if I'm a good math student and I'm really interested in the hard sciences and quantitative numbers and the things that I see in those courses, maybe that means that I can kind of rule out the idea that I'm going to be a literature or an English major, or that I'm going to pursue an MFA in poetry one day. That's good enough at that age. You don't have to say, I'm going to be a computer science major as a freshman. Just know that my skill set kind of slants more towards this direction. And then each year that you go through high school, you should be looking to kind of, wean into a more narrow path, so that by the time you're a junior and by the time you're applying, there's a few programs at universities that you can really see yourself succeeding in. And whether it's computer science, whether it's data science, whether it's symbolic systems, you know that those are the areas of interest. And then on the application, you go for one and you go all in on that one individual program, but you know full well that when you get to that campus, if you want to pivot 1 degree left or right, or even potentially transfer out of the College of Engineering into the College of Arts and Sciences, that is a possibility for you. So remember that defining your hook and creating that spike for the college process is very much the college process. You do not have to do that in actuality in your own life and only, find interest in these few things. We want multi-dimensional students. We want people with multiple interests. Just the way the college process works, when it comes time to put pen to paper there, you have to be able to show a very streamlined and pointed interest. But on the day-to-day, you're going to be enjoying many things that you do without having to exclude yourself from certain activities.
What would you say to students who feel their entire future is dependent on getting into the top schools?
It's really not, unless you want to be a college consultant. Kidding. If there's so many great schools out there, and we're also like in real time seeing a huge shift. Allie speaks with who's in the back. She speaks with a lot of our families, and they're coming to us. They want all these top tier colleges initially, but then they discover that there's so many other schools out there that might be a better fit. Some people might say that that's like a cop-out answer, like that we can't help you get into the best possible college, but finding the best fit is just as important. So it's important for you to visit these colleges, visit these schools, and see, really, in a way, try to forget the brand name. I know it's hard to say, but forget the brand. See if you think you'll be able to thrive there. I think for example, University of Wisconsin, I think this was like a few years ago, but I think the most amount of Fortune 500 CEOs graduated from Wisconsin. And a lot of people don't know that. So don't think that if you don't get into an Ivy or a Stanford or Duke or MIT that you're not going to be successful. That's not it whatsoever. It's about finding the best fit where you think that you're going to be able to thrive and work hard. And that's ultimately what you need. And it's really you. Like, you're the one who's going to, make the decision whether or not you're going to be working hard, being able to utilize all resources on campus. So it's really not the school brand really that's going to propel you. I graduated Yale in 2017. I'm 29. I have friends still from 2017 who are not employed. They've been applying they can't not find a job. Some of them do not want a job, but then others cannot find a job. So it's really not the school. It's you. And if you think you're going to be able to thrive in a certain school or university, that's really what it takes. It's all, in a way, it's all up to you. But yeah.
Yeah, and I would add, I tell this story to a lot of the families. 6 months into me being at Stanford, I called my parents. I walked into my advisor's office and I said, I'm transferring. This is the worst place on earth. Can't stand it one more day. They said, why don't you wait a little bit, calm down, stop being dramatic.
He's very dramatic.
And the reality is that so much of I had some sense talked into me, and I was patient, and I found my group, and I found my community, I found my kind of place there, and it did feel like home by the time I graduated. But the reality is so much of your experience in college is dictated by your freshman roommate, by your advisor, by the people that you meet at AdNet weekend, by the teacher you have in your favorite class. And so no matter where you go, you still have to, go through all those barriers and make sure that, you are having the experience you want. The work is not done when you get into an Ivy League school. There's still infinite number of experiences that you could have on that campus. And so I think a lot of students make the mistake of, once I get in, the work is now done. Certainly you have a foot in the door for certain opportunities, and you may have an easier time getting a job interview, and you may have an easier time meeting people who are going to be, change makers one day. But it's not over whatsoever. We work with students all the time who end up going on to be wildly successful, who go to schools that are not in the top 10, right? And a lot of times that chip on their shoulder is really what gives them that drive and that motivation to keep going. And being in the 20th percentile at Yale is not going to be that impressive to many people. And so if you are going to a school that you really have no business going to, and that you're going to flounder when you get there, you may sometimes be better off being at the top of the class at a slightly, lesser institution according to rankings and prestige. But if you can graduate at the top of the class, if you can be the one in the front of the line to get that internship opportunity, if there's 3 undergraduate research positions, really hard to get at MIT, not going to be as hard to get at a school like UNC. Still very difficult, but the chances are better. And those are the things that are really going to propel you further in your career and in your life. So, it's something to shoot for. There are certainly advantages to it. There's no doubt about that. But the story is not over by any means. And you can be wildly successful coming from any university. I think Chris said it best. It's really about the person rather than the name on the degree.
And finding the best fit college is great, and you can kind of do that by visiting some of these schools. Obviously, you're only there for a few hours, if even that. It depends also on the weather. If it's raining that day, you might not like the school. I went to I went on a tour to Georgetown, and it rained, and I hated it. So I crossed it off my list. But the thing is, don't visit all these colleges your sophomore year or first half of junior year. No. You can visit all these schools. It's free. You can go. But they don't want you yet. So work hard in school, get the grades, do the work, and then visit the schools, I would say the summer before senior year. That's the best time to do it, so that you actually have the work lined up. Don't distract yourself by visiting 20 schools sophomore year. And a lot of times students feel like, oh, that's something I have to do. It's easy to do. Let me just check that off and do it now. That's not the right approach. Visit the schools, I would say, and some people on my team have different opinions, but I would say visit the schools after junior year once the majority of your work is done and you have some free time, because you can visit these schools anytime. Just do it a little bit after.
And sorry, the last thing I'll add just to that is there is a big difference. Like, a lot of people fall into this trap of it's black and white, these results, right? You get into an Ivy or you don't. You succeeded or you failed. There are so many schools in between. People are excited for, myriad schools that they're getting into, and you should be, right? It is an achievement to get into so many of these schools that have unbelievably competitive acceptance rates. And so I think this process, when it's over, it is not just failure or success. There are so many, abilities to define success. And I really think that you shouldn't put so much pressure on yourself to feel as though when that, decision day comes out, it's either going to be a success or a failure. You should think it's going to be one variety or another. There's not going to be success and failure. There's still so much to go before you can define and determine that. So there's people kind of stop looking at the lists after the Ivy Plus schools, and then they go, okay, there's that, and then there's the ones way down on the list. There's a lot of great schools in between, and one of them is going to want to have you.
Okay, I think we're going to open it up to some audience questions, if anyone has a question. Yeah.
I know that some universities ask beyond the Common App, they'll ask for like another essay about why you use that. Is that correct? Like you.
Yep.
So like, what would you recommend like for that essay?
Yeah, so great question. So in addition, on the Common App, for those that aren't fully aware, there is the personal statement where you're going to write a 650-word essay to every school that you're going to apply to using the Common App. Then colleges and universities will ask additional supplemental questions, and they get to define what that question is. There's a few common ones. Why this school? What communities have you been engaged with? Can you define leadership? Tell us about a service opportunity that you've been a part of. There's some common ones out there, but what you're really trying to do is you're trying to say something that shows that you as a student are aligned with the values of that university. So if it says, why Johns Hopkins? Every student is going to start saying, well, here's what I know about Baltimore. Here's what I know about this area. The pre-med program's really great. Well, actually, they have some cool club sports. Those are the things you want to stay away from. You want to, rather than think about the school, you want to think about yourself and say, what is it that I want out of my college experience? What is it that I really want to get from my education? Let me write that down, and then let me go find where I can access that at this school, so that the start of the essay is not coming from Johns Hopkins and what everybody's Googling about it. You're starting with yourself, and you're saying, this is what I want. Now, every school has a different way to provide this, and now that's going to feel really unique. And whether that, does mean that there needs to be a vibrant Jewish life on campus. That was something that when I was looking at Stanford, I thought, this is maybe something that I need to consider. The Hillel off campus is pretty far away. How often am I going to get to go there? How many Jews am I seeing on campus? How many are on the baseball team? These are questions that when I was writing my supplemental essays, I was always looking, where am I going to find the Jewish life on campus? And how am I going to put that into my essays and show that it's a part of what I'm looking for and what I'm going to contribute to on campus, rather than going the other direction. So I'd say start with yourself and then mirror, your values into the schools.
So just to build on that, like you were saying like about Johns Hopkins and how there's specific things like the pre-med. How would you like research that university to find that?
Yeah, so the first place you want to go is you do want to go onto their university website, right? So, and you want to look at, first of all, the departments and the colleges that they have. What school are you going to be applying to? Are you going to be applying to the School of Medicine? Are you going to be applying to the College of Arts and Sciences, the College of Engineering? They don't really care if they have a great pre-med program if you're going to be an English major, and it's probably not something you should be talking about in the first place. It's not relevant to you. So you want to get an understanding of just how the university even is structured and organized. And the best place to do that is to go directly to their website. And then as you start to, get an understanding of, okay, I'm applying into this department, here's what's available to me. I can't take classes over here. I now want to start saying, here's the majors that I'm going to be interested in. Here's the research centers. Here's the organizations, the campus groups, the student organizations that are really going to fill my cup when I'm on campus. And certainly their website is great. info sessions. They offer virtual info sessions. You can sign up for that. Oftentimes they're recorded. There's YouTube channels of former students talking about whatever topic you want to find at these. And on our website, there are blogs upon blogs that you guys can go read about what makes each of these universities special, and what are the best opportunities to look for. So a combo of third party and directly from the university.
And they all, some of them might ask very creative questions, like Chicago. They're known for that. It's like one year, the question was, "Where's Waldo?" And that was the entire question. And you have to write 500 words. Where do you even begin? They want to see how creative you think, how you think. So there's no set of rules. It can really be anything. So be as creative as possible, because some schools will do that. Harvard, sometimes it's write a letter to your future roommate here. How do you start that? So yeah, some of them can be creative, and just keep that in mind.
How are colleges kind of, I don't know, sussing out students are writing this with AI?
Yeah, great question. I think they haven't caught up fully, for sure. But how are universities sussing out whether students are using AI for their essays? Duke took a stance on this last year. They said, we are not evaluating the writing of students in their essays. We're evaluating the content, but we cannot ascertain whether a student wrote this or ChatGPT did. And so we're not going to evaluate a student's intellect or writing ability based on this essay. Other schools have kind of followed suit, but really admissions officers are looking for students who are striking that right tone. And I think while they are concerned about AI usage in the essays, fabricating a story that an AI bot has generated is certainly, not in the spirit of this process. But if students are using AI in a creative way to help them, tell their own story, to think about what could make them unique, those are things that a lot of universities are encouraging. Caltech even asks, on their application, how have you used AI as part of this process? They want to know that you didn't write your essay using it, but they said, did you engage with it in any way during the process? We're trying to better understand how this is going to intersect with the education space. So there is a kind of a spectrum of how schools view this, but I think for the most part, they are trusting that their admissions officers can view essays and understand, did a 17 or 18-year-old write this? And if they sneak one by them, I think that they are willing to take that risk and know that for the most part, AI isn't going to help you tell a meaningful personal story. It might help you edit this perfectly and create great transitions, but really it's not the writing and the prose that you're using that gets you in. It's the values that you're showing, and AI is not very good at that. We have an article on our website where one of our employees kind of analyzed an AI essay and showed how, it's pretty wonderfully written, and when you really dive into it, though, it's pretty generic, and a lot of people could have written this, and admissions officers can start to smell that stuff out.
Do you think that with kind of piggybacking on this question, that the face-to-face interview is going to start to become more important going forward?
I think so. I think we're not really there yet. A lot of top-tier colleges use alumni, for interviews, and really, a lot of students are, don't really fully understand that process. It's really for the student to get to know the university more, rather than the interviewer actually trying to assess that candidate. I have to opt out, obviously, because it's a conflict of interest, but I get emails all the time from Yale asking me to be an alumni interviewer. And there aren't that many. So sometimes whether or not you get an interview, for the most part, at most schools, do not matter. It's really kind of random whether or not you get one. It depends on if you applied regular or early, what time you applied. All of that kind of plays a role. But I think in the next few years, interviews might be a part of the application process, where it's the actual admissions officers interviewing certain candidates. Maybe there's going to be a certain level where you pushed up to the next round. Right now, you have no clarity whether or not you are moved to the next round or not. It's either you get in or you don't. There's no explanation, and they'll never give you an explanation. but maybe they'll create a second round in the future, so that they are able to interview qualified candidates. Of course, at some schools like WashU St. Louis and Tufts, interviews are very important. If you apply to WashU St. Louis, you want to actually fly there, visit the campus, and schedule an interview with an admissions officer on campus. You can do that. You can't do that at most schools, but WashU encourages that. They love demonstrated interest. So they want to feel special that you flew there, you spent time on campus, got to know the school, and that you are committed. And you know that you're going to be able to really thrive once you're on campus. So every school is a little bit different, but I would say right now, interviews are mostly for the benefit for the student rather than the university, especially at the top tier level.
Yeah, and I do think there might be some change to this though, where I think it's scary for a lot of students. I really think it would be a great thing for them to use more interviews, because I think we all know that it's pretty tough to fake it when you get in a room with someone and you have to kind of, back up what it is that you wrote on your application, and the students who really can are going to do better in that process. So the only people who should be afraid of that being a reality are those that really, oversold their abilities or weren't really, transparent on their application. But I think the other potential that we've heard a little bit about is that, maybe there's some level of recording or AI or an interaction that could just be done en masse for people to review and evaluate that way, because the reality is more and more people are applying to these schools, and to get interviews for all these students and to create equity in that process would be so hard. And if you look at these, banking jobs right now, that first round is an AI, audit basically of your resume and an interview. And I think you could see technology playing a role in facilitating more, I guess it's not face-to-face human interaction there, but true interaction, because I think there certainly is a need for that, and I would like to see things go in that direction. I think it's just there's a bottleneck in how many people can do the interviews, but yeah, I think you're right. I think we will see that happen.
I just want to expand on this a little bit from a different angle. If you're an alumni and you're doing student interviews or involved as an alumni school, is that helping your kids? Is that hurting them? I mean, where are we with that involvement?
Yeah, that involvement is not going to hurt or help. There are people who choose to recuse themselves during the year that their kid is applying, just for conflict of interest reasons. But that relationship with the university is going to be the same whether you're interviewing or not, as that you are a legacy at that school. So that's not going to play a huge role. What it could do is it could help you get an understanding of, the students and the types of students that you're seeing apply. If you're interested in that, right, you might see, wow, I got to see the scorecard that they're asking me to use, the questions that they're asking me to ask these students, and I'm making recommendations. And you know what? My kid's way better than half of the kids that I'm recommending, for a 3 out of 3 on this. So I feel pretty good. And it can help be a thermometer for that process. But I don't think you should view interviewing as, this is some sort of special connection I'm going to be able to leverage to a university, or that, I'm pandering to the school and that they're going to, see that this is a transparent relationship. Any other question? Yeah. We only have time for 2,000. Yeah, you want to take it?
Sure. So I think for the most part, in school, it depends what high school you attend. Some schools are more open to it. Private schools typically are not. They discourage using outside counselors, primarily because you're paying tuition at that school. But this is supposed to be their job, right? That's why you're paying them. But at the same time, they might have a different, it's a little bit of a, not fully a conflict, but their job and their goal is to get every single student in that grade into a college. They don't really care which college, especially if the private school or school that you attend routinely gets students into top colleges. They already have, one Harvard. They already have one Princeton, one Stanford, one Duke. They already have that. They don't need it to be 10. And they also don't need that one student to be your child. For us, we will focus on your child, make sure that we optimize his or her chance at getting to his or her top school choices. So everything we do is going to be really for your child's benefit, not really, we're not going to care and really say, you know what, we have to think about all these other students and what they want to achieve with the college process. We're going to be really strategic with this, try to figure out, if the valedictorian has done a lot of extracurriculars, is applying to Yale or, Penn early decision, when we have that info, maybe it's strategic for you not to apply early to Penn. Also to Yale, you don't want to apply early to Yale. That's the number one mistake. You always apply to Yale regular. We've seen so much more success with students during that round. Unless you're an athlete or unless you have double legacy and you're kind of involved in the school, or unless your parents donated $30 million. It's that's really the early candidates for Yale specifically. So, but I would say, it really depends, but I think.
Yeah, I would also say we tend to work on your behalf, but we don't want to be in those counseling meetings. We don't want to be working alongside the counselor. Like Chris said, our priorities are different, and our methods are a little bit different too. But what the counseling office should perceive is that, wow, this kid's really put together. They're a really great kid to work with. They're always on time with everything that I've asked them to do. They've done all the work. This is going to make my job really easy. And that's what we want. We want them to be able to write a glowing recommendation for you. We want them to be able to, help you in the parts of the process that they need to help you in, sending in your transcripts, writing your rec letter, and kind of pushing all the buttons. But when it comes time to strategize, we would love to own that process and then present them with the ideas that they're going to go, wow, that's a great strategy. And, we love that and we support that.
And we also create more work for the counselors really behind the scenes. Like, for example, almost all students that we work with starting in 9th grade, we tell them to register for the Congressional Award. It's simple. It's really more work for the counseling office. And they're not going to say no to a student if they ask, but they're never going to recommend it. That's just creating more paperwork, more work for them to do. But if a student comes and says, I want to apply for this, can you be my advisor? There's no way they can say no. So they will accept it, but the student needs to know about it. So that's just one of few dozen examples and programs students should be involved with starting in 9th, 10th grade. So we don't care, this is our job, but the counselor, they're working with few hundred students. Our team, we're working with anywhere between 4 to 12 students per counselor. And everybody on our team is full-time. We do not have part-time, which is kind of rare. But even with counselors at school, they're working with students, nonstop there every day. It's just a checklist of things to do. We're actually helping the students execute, instead of just saying, here's a 30-minute block where we can brainstorm an essay or edit something. We'll spend 3, 4, 5 hours if needed to brainstorm a certain essay for 5 days in a row. If that's what it takes.
Build the ladder and we help you up it. They find a ladder from the closet and they bring it out and they go, this worked last year. We'll use that.
I like that. That's a helpful answer. Thank you. Of course. Any other questions?
Quick question. Let's do a strategy. You said something about the UC schools not considering 9th grade grades.
Yes, correct. Yep.
So do they recalculate your GPA based on 10th and 11th and whatever you've done as well?
Yep, and they have a very weird way to calculate their GPA. In fact, that they encourage you before you apply to UC school, plug your classes in here, check to make sure that this is a convertible class into our system. They use an A through G system, and they say this class counts, this class doesn't. Extra, electives like, home ec, those aren't going to count towards the GPA, so you can't pad it with physical education and home ec. They have a very interesting calculation, but what I would say is for students that did have a tough time freshman year, very common for students to struggle and adjust. In one thing I would say is just take a look at the UCs, because you may have ruled out UC Berkeley and UCLA because you had a really bad freshman year, but reconsider that. There's an opportunity there to get into a top 25 school. that, is going to look past that. But yes, absolutely, they have their own calculation, and every school really does. They're just transparent about how they go about it. Other schools, Ivies even, will recalculate your GPA internally. They're not just looking at what your high school presented. They're going to look at your transcript, and they're going to cancel out some of the classes they don't want to consider. Yeah, I think so. I don't see that changing at this point. And the one thing that so some people don't know this. It is test blind for evaluation purposes, but you can still submit your SAT if you've taken it to the UCs, and there's two reasons to do that. One is merit-based scholarships. So if you score really well and you're an amazing student, sometimes they'll give you some financial aid on a merit-based for merit-based rationale. The second reason is you can place into courses. If you have, an AP score in a language, or if you have, an 800 on your math section of the SAT, you may be able to pass out of that first math class and get onto a track more quickly. So it's blind for evaluations, but your test scores can still help you there. Yeah, they don't usually publicize, ahead of time. It seems like it's a snap announcement, but it's a copycat kind of industry. And I would say that yes, in order to be competitive and to, attract those same profile of students, that a lot of schools at that similar kind of ilk are going to be probably following suit. Ohio State's a leader in.
But if they haven't done it already, do you think they'll?
They still could. For this next class, they still could. Yeah, they absolutely could. There's no rules that they're bound to follow in that way. They'll make whatever decision suits them.
And also, College Board, even though they're a nonprofit, they make $1 billion every year. So there's definitely lobbying there. They want these colleges to require it because then they just make more money. Yep. So it's unfortunate that that's how this process works.
They might add another test. They might say, you know what, we're gonna add another test.
They got rid of the subject test. They might come out with something else because they replaced subject test revenue with APs, and they wanted more schools to take APs because they actually make more money because the school districts pay for that, not the student, the consumer. So who knows what they're gonna invent next.
So my question was, for kids that want like a certain, let's say, realm of school, but they're not necessarily yet like married to one specific school that they want, how important is it to apply ED versus EA? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
Yep.
if you want a certain type of school, let's say, but you don't know exactly what you want, but you want to get in, how much better, I guess, is your chance to apply ED versus EA? And like, what would you tell a kid, a student
Yeah.
in that scenario?
Yeah. So for us, the starting place is always we should be looking for a school that you can apply ED to. There better be a compelling reason not to do so, because it has gotten so competitive that your chances are so much greater if we are able to bind yourself to a school. But if you're the type of student who says, you know what, I don't feel comfortable with that yet. On December 15th, when I hear back yes from this school, that's not going to make me, scream up and down in joy. I'm still going to wonder what would have happened in the regular decision round. That didn't fully feel like my place. That's a pretty compelling reason to say, okay, let's reconsider this and let's think, from a strategy perspective, not the most, optimized route to go. But if we can look past that and we can all come to an agreement that the strategy is something that's going to be a little bit secondary here to get you into a top 15 school, if that's no longer our goal, it's to create optionality and it's to find yourself into 5 or 6 schools in the regular decision round and then go visit them and decide which one feels best to you. That's a different goal. And at that point, we might say, you know what, you should apply early action, but not bind yourself. And then know that you may not get into that school. And that has to be something you're willing to live with to create optionality down the road. So there is no one size fit all. I think we use kind of an opt-out system. Instead of tell us why you should ED, tell us why you shouldn't, and then we can go from there.
So then I guess, sorry, I know everyone has one more like follow-up question then. For schools that are kind of like on the same level, then, what do you tell kids to look at? I know you mentioned like the baseball team and like being Jewish and like being Muslim. What do you look
Yeah.
differentiate, that helps them figure out why do they pick one over
Yeah.
another.
Yeah, it's very personal, but the things that we tell students are, I mean, the people, for the most part. Try to interact with as many people as possible on that campus, alumni, kids from your high school that went there. Figure out what types of kids are going there, because you're going to be there for 4 years. You're going to live in that city. You better like the people that you're surrounding yourself with, and just because they have a specialized program in, logistical operations, that sounds interesting to you. That's not really a reason to choose this school. You might, in a month from now, realize that's not what you want to do. If you're surrounded by the people you want to be around, that is truly the litmus test for me, which is go spend time there, go talk to people from that university, and if they feel like your people, that's the number one reason to go. But certainly there are many people who say, I just want the best exmissions. I want the place that's going to get me into the best law school, the best grad school, research opportunities, ranking. It comes down to what your preference is, but for me, I would say talk to as many people as you can. Go to the place that the people feel like you.
That's a great way to close out.
So
Take one last question.
this is sort of a crazy question, but if a family was geographically mobile, i.e. the family could decide to be anywhere in high school, is there, and again, the goal was top 20 university, is there a reason to be in a certain part of the country or not be in a certain part of the country because of either competitive reasons or anything else?
Yeah, we had students who moved to like Arkansas, Kansas, middle of nowhere. It works. They want geographical diversity. Living in Miami does not help. It's better than living in New York or LA or San Francisco, but it's super competitive here, especially with more and more people from LA, from New York moving here. If you can move and you want to live in the middle of nowhere for 4 years, it will very, very, very much help.
Yeah, and obviously huge.
And people do that.
Yeah, we do have some clients that have done that, but I mean, I think it's a big risk to take, of course, and I think for many people, there's so many things to think about with that, but yeah, the reality is there are geographical regions that are better to come from, easier to stand out in, and that you can game that system if you're inclined to.
All right, well, I certainly don't want to contradict anything that the experts have said, but we all love the JCC, so we're all staying in Miami. But in
No
all-
JCC in Arkansas.
Exactly. But in all seriousness, thank you so much. This has been tremendous. I mean, I have pages of notes. I know we could be here all night asking you questions, but thank you for your time and your guidance. I'm sure you'll be hearing from a lot of people.
Thank you guys
Thank
so
you.
much. Yeah,
Thank you.
great questions. Thank Ellie and Zach. They were unbelievable.
Thank you.